While most of this drama that's constantly happening on this site, and it is constantly happening on this site, I know there's a number of people who like to claim that this is something that has recently started happening and that the community here has gone to pot and all that sort of stuff, which is not true. It's simply not true. I have been observing this sort of drama ever since I've arrived on this site. It just seems to rear its ugly head in different communities at different times, and then it moves on or it dies away again and it pops up somewhere else. But what it always has in common, what these dramas always have in common, is how ridiculous they usually are and how laughable the behavior of those involved is. And some good videos about that have been made recently by the likes of Nelly Diddle, for example, and Ashes the Raven, who've kind of been lampooning this sort of behavior and holding up a mirror to those people who are involved in it. But having said that, this is not actually about any particular drama, and I certainly won't be referring to any particular drama that might be happening right now on this site, and I know there are a couple of things going on. But what I want to talk about here is this sort of dichotomy that I've noticed, that I've seen a number of people bringing up, presenting what's going on as if there is the real life on the one hand and YouTube on the other hand, as if the two are completely different and separable as such, which they're not. Both YouTube and what they like to call real life are part of a single reality in which we all find ourselves, and there is no sharp divide between the two. So arguments like what happens on YouTube should stay on YouTube and those sort of arguments I simply don't buy into. What I think is that, the way you decide to behave should be pretty much the same across the board, whether you're deciding to behave in a certain way on YouTube or offline in physical reality out in the street, for example. There should be no real difference, and there is no real difference. And that also means that with regard to your behavior in general, there are certain things that you do and that you don't do. And if you don't do them out in the street, offline, when you're dealing with physical human beings on a one-to-one basis, you don't do them online on YouTube either. It's very easy to forget that you're talking to real people on YouTube. You're talking to a bunch of pixels in a little kind of square there, with a username attached to it, and what people sometimes forget is that behind each one of those usernames there's a real person there. So if you don't do it out in the street, if you don't do it when you're dealing with a person on one-to-one, then don't do it on YouTube either. And that includes behaviors such as bullying, for example, and harassment. Although, of course, you might want to observe that the way to engage in such types of behaviors might be slightly different out in the street, for example, and on a site like YouTube. But the underlying definition of the behavior is still the same. Let me illustrate that with a little example. For example, harassment. If you walk down the street and you see somebody and you don't like that person, you do actually have a perfect right to simply walk up to that person and to address them and to tell them that you say don't like them, for example. But don't be surprised if that person then decides to turn around and walk away from you. That is where your liberty ends. You do not have the right to then start following that person down the street and start demanding that they should pay you attention and that they should listen to all the nonsense that you're spouting against them. If they don't want to listen to you, they don't have to listen to you, and they have every right in the world to walk away. If you keep following them, you are harassing them. Translate that to YouTube and you have the situation of where a person is on YouTube, they have a channel, they present their ideas, they talk to the camera, and you have every right in the world as another YouTube user to come into that video and make your comments. That is your freedom of speech, so to speak. That person, though, has equally as a person would have in the real world, got the right to turn around and walk away from you. And in YouTube terms, that means block you. And that means that you should take the hint and get lost. As simple as that. So if a person blocks you, if a person indicates to you on YouTube that they're done talking to you, then they're done talking to you and you have to take the hint. If you start to make sock accounts and coming back to that person and harassing them even more, that is harassment, that is a form of bullying, and that is not tolerable. I do not accept that in real life, out on the streets. I don't accept it in YouTube either. Of course, that doesn't mean that you can't continue to talk about that person. That is not bullying, for example. Me talking about somebody behind their backs is not bullying them. So let's again take this out on the street example in reality. So you don't have the right to follow somebody down the street and to keep poking them and to keep telling them that they should listen to you and your ravings. But you do have a right to see the person walk away and then turn to the guy next to you and say, like, did you see what, and talk to them about that person in public to everybody else. That person is not obliged to listen to you or to pay you any attention, but you have a right to be and am about them as much as you like to everybody else who would like to listen, who would care to listen. So again, in YouTube terms, that means that if a person blocks you, you need to stay away from them, because they have indicated that they want no interaction with you whatsoever. That is something that has to be respected. That doesn't mean that you can't post videos about them and, tell everybody on YouTube who cares to listen what you think about that person. That is your right. That is something that you should be allowed to do. And if that other person who has just walked away can't handle that, that's their problem. And that is something that we can all laugh about if somebody is acting so, as they call it, butthurt, that they cannot stand somebody saying something negative about them on YouTube. That's pathetic, that's ridiculous. That is something that deserves to be lampooned. But that isn't bullying either. What becomes bullying again is if that person who walked away in the street sends their buddies around to give you a good beating. That again, you crossed the line there. You see how you crossed the line there when you're out in the street. And similarly on YouTube, if you respond to somebody, talking crap about you behind your back, as they are perfectly got a right to do, but if you respond to that by organizing flagging campaigns or DMCAs or anything like that, that's where you cross the line again. You see that little balance that needs to be struck? And maybe also, do you see how it is very similar between the outside world, out in the streets, and on a site like this? There are no different rules there. Mainly, perhaps, different methods. But in the end, the principles remain the same. Whether it's out in the street, or in real life, as some people like to call it, or on YouTube, that doesn't matter.